us. We are live. How's it going, dudes? It's it is Thursday, May 14th, and we are doing our first industry chats segment with Shaun Hatton and Keith Thompson of the infamous Laser Destroyer team. Wonderful composers, musicians who have graced us with our incredible Sometimes Always Monsters and Always Sometimes Monsters soundtracks. How are you guys doing?
I'm good.
Really good.
Yes, you guys are obviously, live in our studio right now, defying all quarantine rules. Yeah, so I guess this is a pretty informal sort of thing. I don't have, a big stack of burning questions or whatever, but if anybody in the chat's got questions for the band, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will do our best to get them answered.
And we can't see the questions. Keith and I don't know what's coming.
They're locked.
So-
They're locked in little internet boxes.
Yeah,
But I will be the great messenger.
sounds great. Justin, it's wonderful to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah,
And Keith, we've actually very very seldom had face-to-face experience. Most of our interaction has been through the music itself, which has been a pleasure. But it is a very different relationship than most of those that I'm used to.
We were prepared for this lockdown that we're in.
Right.
We were already existing in a virtual realm.
I'm curious, as people who have do you have a lot of relationships with people that you don't I guess talk to or socialize with all that much, but you almost communicate exclusively about music? Is that, I mean, you guys are both musicians, I assume that's way more common than it is in my life.
I have a lot of friends that I've met through music, and then we just end up talking about whatever, and we just found that we have other things in common as well. Keith and I obviously met because of music. We've got a lot of similar musical tastes, and then we realized that we worked well together as a team here. But we talk about a lot more than just music. I don't know if there's anyone that I just talk only about music with. Yeah, I don't know. I think out of all of the things you can be a nerd about, music is one of the more universal things, because there's so many different kinds of music, right? There's people who would consider themselves gamers, and it's a big part of someone's identity for a lot of people, but they consider themselves I'm a gamer, and their whole thing is they just want to play a lot of games, I guess. I come from the video game world as well. I got a lot of crossover experience, and I would meet a lot of people who their only outlet for creative expression or media consumption would be playing video games, and that was it for them. That's all they really cared about. That's all they wanted to do, and power to them. But when it comes to music, I think music is always part of your life, whether you're actively involved in making it, so it's a bigger part of your life, or whether you're just kind of a passive listener. You turn the radio on every now and then. So music is kind of it wouldn't be the only thing that you talk about. I think even people who have their own studios, who go to work recording bands and that kind of thing, would probably talk about other stuff. I don't know if that answers your question. Just kind of vibing.
Yeah. No, Yimboy agrees with you. Says true. Music is always there, and I kind of get what you mean. But yeah, music is also I guess not shoved into the background of our lives more than video games are, because video games are an active participant thing, whereas you're walking through the mall, you're gonna hear music. So I think it's yeah, music. There's definitely people who like music is their identity, but yeah, you know, it is definitely a widely universal thing. Keith, I'm very
Mhm.
very familiar with Sean's background in video games because we go
Mhm.
way back as game community folk. But I'm very curious to know more about your history with video games, and what led to your desire to like start making music for games.
I am not uh, active in gaming at this point, but a very long time ago, I was. We had a Sega Genesis, my brother and I, and that was our. Yeah, that was our. Well, before that, a Commodore 64, uh, and that moved into Sega Genesis. And what I always wanted was a Nintendo, the earliest original version. So um, I was really into that era of video game music at that time in my life. And then I kind of went away from that and I got into performing music. And um, much later, I got into um, recording music. And so I met Shaun in like, I think 2009. And it was a natural fit to get into this.
Guys, just like fast friends, like just
Mm-hmm.
clicked.
Mm-hmm. That's it. It's just how it goes, you know. It's a segue, or it's a segue. It's a gateway drug. Music is a gateway drug into language that uh, brings. It's universal, you know. It's for some of us, we have a hard time speaking with words, and it's through another language, another medium that transcends time and space that we can connect in ways that, um, you know, it kind of, to me, it all has a place. And what's interesting about music and games is it people spend a lot of time interacting with a game in a way that they wouldn't interact with other sorts of media, and so the music experience in that context is completely unique, in my opinion, and interesting.
Interesting. So as a fellow Sega kid, I'm curious what you played on the Genesis growing up, because that was my world too. And I remember it had a lot of really great game music. I mean, is there anything that like you
Yeah,
distinctly?
um, I'm trying to I'm trying to remember because they those two gaming systems, the Commodore 64 and the Sega Genesis, at that time in my life, which is so long ago, I have a hard time distinguishing between them. Um, I just remember us playing Paperboy a lot,
Okay.
and that was on the Commodore. And then my brother probably remembers better what we played on Sega. It was the games that came with it. You would get like a couple of games that came with the gaming system, and that's all we played. It took a long time to get new games. I
Yeah.
remember playing Sonic the Hedgehog, and absolutely loved the music.
Yeah. It had
Yeah,
this great soundtrack.
Sega had a great FM chip built into the Genesis, so you can get some really cool sounds out of it. There's a lot of musician friends of mine who use Sega Genesis hardware as part of their live setups and also part of their studio setups. Shout out to the band Villainist, who they introduce themselves as a Sega Genesis based rock band when they get on stage. And they're a lot more than that. Obviously, they've got like live instrumentation, like your classic rock band stuff, you know, drums, guitar, bass, keys. But then they have these Genesis powered um, sounds that are also coming out of their setup, and it's really cool. It's neat that game music has game music has gone from a point of technical limitation in terms of, you know, you only have so many instruments and tracks to play with, to being something that now today, with our pretty much unlimited musical vocabulary and instruments, that people are choosing to use, um, like creatively limiting software and hardware, which also in a way can be really freeing when you're coming up with ideas, because sometimes if you go into even your home studio or open up GarageBand, sometimes the options in front of you can be overwhelming. Like, oh, what do I start with? What sound do I want? And there's something really pure about old video game sounds. There's only so many of them, and you can almost know the entire instrument library off by heart.
Do you guys like what sort of self-imposed limitations do you ever put, or what sort of limitations do you self-impose um, when you want to get into the creative? Because, like you said, it can be really daunting. Like I have that problem sometimes when I look at the game, and I can be like, okay, it's a game about life. It's set in the real world. I can do almost anything, and then you get like a little bit of like creative state, like stalling, like you just don't know where to go. Do you ever find yourself like when you go to create some music, setting some limitations on yourself, like a chiptunes artist would, specifically limit themselves to using the game hardware, or that sort of thing?
Keith, do you want to answer first?
Yeah, what I'll do is a batch of songs with one keyboard. I will get tired of using software-based instruments, which is the go-to. It's great. You can't ever go wrong with software-based instruments. So MIDI and samples that you can control with your MIDI controller, and there's a lot you can do. It's infinite. It's pretty incredible. Sometimes, though, if you predated that technique of recording, it's easier to just get a guitar out and stick with that and layer up a song with just a guitar. But I had this one keyboard in my possession for quite a few years, and it just came into my possession, and I've had a lot of luck with it. It just, when I play it, it was like, this is the device by which things make the most sense. So I know to always go back to that specific keyboard and use it exclusively for a batch of songs.
That's how I feel about
and,
RPG
and I think
Maker.
yeah, because it simplifies your life. You know what it can and can't do, and you don't have to spend a bunch of time researching. Oh wow, it can do 1,000 more things than what I'm doing with it, and then you feel bad about it. Instead, you just know it can only do what it can do, and you move on with your ideas instead of the minutia of technology.
Right. And Hatton, what about you? Like, what's your creative process like in terms of utilizing the technology or limitation?
So usually I feel like I'm already pretty creatively limited, because it's hard to come up with stuff sometimes. But then other times it's like the creative juices just flow, and you can almost, or I almost get into a zone where I can bang out a few different demos in a single sitting. What I normally do is I start off small always, because well you have to start somewhere. So I usually have like a melody in mind. It might be like a riff of a few bars, and I'll lay that down. Sometimes that ends up being the lead guitar riff, or maybe it's a synthesizer riff, or sometimes it's a bass riff. But I normally just lay down some very rudimentary drums, just to keep time and kind of know where I am in the song, but then add on the bass and then try adding on other things. And sometimes I go a little bit overboard, and there's like a lot of stuff going on in the song, and I got to start scaling back. So you've taken this thing, you've built a thing, and then you've just like slapped all this plasticine on it. Now you're kind of carving away and fine tuning it. Creatively, or like instrument wise, I don't have that many instruments at my disposal, like physically. So I'm working with pretty limited hardware already. Um, but I just basically scrape the surface of what this stuff is really capable of most of the time, because I'm just trying to get a mood. Um, in working with you, you gave us specific moods or feelings to work from, which is it is very creatively liberating. because we know, like, we don't have an idea of like, okay, this needs to be like a rock style song or a pop style song or whatever. We just have these moods to go with, and then kind of thinking about the moods and how we want to express those moods in on an instrumentation level is very, it's restricting in a way, but it's also very freeing. Like, you can do a lot with a little bit of hardware or a little bit of software. And on the software side of things, I mostly use a very inexpensive, accessible program called Reaper. And I use it almost exclusively like a digital 4-track. So I'm not doing MIDI stuff. I'm recording actual waveforms and manipulating those, which is fun. But then, like, if I mess something up, I have to go back and basically re-record things most of the time instead of just nudging things around.
That's interesting to hear that you use waveforms, because again, I know very little about how our music is actually produced, and so it's very interesting to hear these things, because so many people compliment the retro aesthetic of the soundtrack, and like everything, authentically old is just raw MIDI file, and but how did you guys feel about, we kind of like, it's so long ago, because when we sort of established what the soundtracks were going to kind of be like, it was like 2013, and we were kind of still like, at that time I was like very stuck in the RPG Maker kind of aesthetic, and we were still working within the confines of what this engine can do, and it's definitely going to make something that's like a classic video game, so it should have some of that retro feel to it throughout, but I always kind of like resisted against that, and I can barely remember the conversations we had about like what this thing was supposed to sound like back then, but it like the game, I think the soundtrack kind of like plays into the retroness, but like at the same time pushes outside of it. Like a lot of the art in the game, we're like limited by the same definitions of like this many pixels, like an old game, but we're using modern Photoshop techniques and stuff to add proper blending in these kinds of things. So I'm curious, like what like do you remember what it was like when we started, and like how this whole like musical aesthetic kind of came about, because it's like a long time ago for me.
I'm trying to remember.
Deer Hunter says, it reminds me I should pick up the soundtracks on Bandcamp. That's right. Go to laserdestroyerteam.bandcamp.com and get the soundtrack. There's like a lot of music there, and it's all good.
We made a lot of music, didn't we?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. I think going back to having the mood idea, we, for this game, we basically composed a song for each of the main characters based on who they were, things that they were likely to do, basically looking at personas, as you would in like marketing. We want to send an email that this guy's gonna like. Who's this guy? Well, his name is Hassan, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we basically used these personas, these moods, and went from there. As far as like the retro, like people giving it or not giving it a nod, but like saying this sounds retro, it's because we're old. Like, this is the like we've got these experiences. We've experienced these kinds of sounds in music when those songs were new. So we paint with the color palette that we've been given our entire lives, and
we're trapped in our favorite decade.
we basically are. We're very moody about it, though. We're not like, this isn't 80s workout for us. We're like, goth 80s, new wave kind of stuff. We're very moody. We're moody teenagers from the 80s.
I guess if you're gonna be stuck in a
Trapped.
decade, you've got to like explore the whole thing, right?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And I guess I tend to gravitate towards certain kinds of bass sounds or synth sounds. Like I really like square waves. I think they sound very punchy, and they really cut through a lot of the other instrumentation pretty easily. So I do try to throw in some video gamey sounding stuff, like more computer sounding stuff here and there, because like when I first started composing video game music, it was very retro chip tunes inspired, and like I actually would use a Game Boy here and there to track a few things, but then of course bring it into a waveform and add all kinds of other stuff to it.
So you mentioned earlier, Hatton, about the song creation process is starting with a bass, adding a ton of plasticine, and then carving away at it. And I'm with you up until the carving away part. Um, in terms of like the way I have created these games and I just generally work, I'm very bad at redaction. I don't take away anything very often, or very seldomly do I do that. And I'm curious how essential that is, and Keith, if this is true for you as well, how important it is to remove elements from a song at a certain point. Because, like, as a game that's mostly about writing and possibilities, it always benefits me to just keep adding stuff, like, or at least as I've seen. Um, and I'm curious how that contrasts with the musical world.
I think when you collaborate with other people through email or through collaboration software, um, you have to get used to leaving your music open. And so even if you want to fill it up with stuff, which is your first thing you want to do, especially when you get your hands on new software or new recording techniques, you were like, I've got 100 ideas. I should put them all in this song, because every time I add a new layer, I get a new idea. I should stick them in there. And after you've done that for like 30 songs, then you get it out of your system, I guess. And you have to, because then if I send Shaun a track, or my brother or Chris Tate a track, or whoever it is I'm working with, they aren't going to hear themselves in it if it's too busy. So sometimes it's even just mute it back down to what you perceive to be its core elements and see what someone else comes with and up with. And I think we're good at that because, I don't know, we just we're used to it.
Yeah, you really got to get your when you're collaborating, especially with other people, you have to get out of the headspace where you feel that maybe a track isn't good enough to send to somebody, because my initial desire is that I want to send something that sounds good and that has like a pretty good fleshed out feel to it, but that's not what we're doing. We have to send like these, it's almost like an exquisite corpse. You just send a little bit and then let the next person add to it, and then pass it along and let someone else add to it. For some of the tracks, obviously, some of the tracks feature one or more of us a little more than the others. Some tracks, one of us or more are not on the track at all. And it's just a matter of, does this track feel complete? Does it feel whole? Does the mood come across as it is? And another thing about scaling stuff back, and this goes for even just doing stuff on our own, the desire is to build something from nothing. And that's essentially what you're doing. You start with silence and you just add instrumentation until it's a completed piece. But sometimes when you add more things, the sound is difficult to hear. Like, things get muddy. It's hard to hear the bass now. The guitar doesn't sound as loud. It is still as loud, it just doesn't sound as loud. The drums feel like they're gone. and the way to, the desire is like, guys, I need to hear my guitar louder in the mix. It's like, no, you just need to hear your guitar clearly. And so you do that by scaling other things back. Maybe you drop the EQ of some of the guitar. You adjust the equalization of the other tracks so that it's not interfering. Or sometimes you just remove instruments altogether or scale them way, way down. If you think of some like really loud rock songs, some of the loudest parts in like 80s anthem rock is when it's just the drums and the bass, and it's like the fist pumping part of the song, and that's loud and it's powerful, and it doesn't need to have all the keys and layered guitars for it to have that feeling.
Interesting. Yeah, cool. So that's like something I guess that's something that I have avoided because like the relationship Jake and I have in terms of like the game creation is I mean the only time anything is suggested to be removed is when it's really broken. Like Jake will be like, "Nah, that bro, you definitely messed that up pretty badly. Remove it or rewrite it or whatever." Um, uh, where you guys have to like creatively come up with that balance a little better, and that facilitates the removal process, which is interesting. um,
Yeah, and it's like, well, you might be removing something because someone feels that it's broken, but in a musical sense, you remove things when it's broken too. Like you
right.
can have a steady 4/4 drum beat and then like throw in a fill because you're going to the next section of the song, but sometimes that fill might sound good on its own, but sound like crap in the context of the existing song. And so it's like, do you want to spend time trying to nail this or like really change the vibe of it to make it fit, or do you want to just remove it because it's fine without it? No one's going to know it's missing because no one knows that you wanted to put it there in the first place.
Right. Yeah, there's a couple features in the game that are definitely gone, and I'm sure people would be very happy if they were in, but they have no idea they were just removed. Because when something, I guess when something's broken in music, it just makes a bad sound. But when something is broken in the game, it like freezes your computer, which
Right.
is completely. It's not going to make your MP3 player explode, probably.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to hurt people with your art. I
Right.
mean, they're
I mean, it'd be nice to know it's an option, but
just
right. Well, the like a paying customer, you don't want to give them a bad
Right.
experience.
I don't know, man. You get to the end of the album and the last track just like makes your iPod completely melt. That'd be a pretty good finale.
Yeah, it's something Death Clock would do for
Yeah.
sure. Oh, it's brutal. Uh, yeah, I think. Oh, the other thing to consider though, like when we're making music for a game, it's like different from just doing music for ourselves or for another purpose, because you need to leave a certain amount of sound range open for things like sound effects and other things that button prompts that the game is going to have. You don't want to take up the entirety of the musical space. Sometimes games are voice acted, so you need to make sure that you know that space is left open so that when all this stuff is added in, it doesn't sound like you know your neighbor down the street playing like a soccer game at
Right.
7 in the morning on Saturday.
There's
You're like,
just too much stuff.
what's all this screaming? Something I speak from experience. I wish he would stop.
So there's I don't know how much you guys know about how the soundtrack was implemented in the new game, but we did some new stuff with it. Um, with the first game, it was like every single scene, every single place. I would go in and like hand pick the song. Whereas with the new one, it's kind of oriented around uh, which people you have relationships with. So there's like kind of like a sorted list of all the tracks, the people you have relationships with. Those songs have like higher priority, or like if you have bad relationships with people, it's like that song is removed from the cue. Like it's out of that character's vocabulary. Um, and I think at the time, like I made this decision, it was like trying to evoke that sensation of when you hear a song on the radio that reminds you of somebody that you know. Um, and we also gave players an actual like option to change the song at will in the game if they don't like what they're hearing, or it's like because some of the tracks you got are like Zombie Taxi can like feel pretty like anxious or put people on edge, and they can have the freedom to change that at will, or they want to like just change the vibe up. They have that freedom, and I'm curious about your thoughts on, I guess, player agency in terms of picking the music, um, and like versus the sort of directed approach. Um, yeah. Does it make a difference to you? I mean, the soundtrack's the soundtrack at the end of the day, but
I think it's cool because that's really interesting, and it's a component that it gives a second life to how a song can exist. So I think it's awesome. I had no idea.
Yeah,
if you think,
go on, go on, Hatton.
I think it's fine to give people that choice. There are a lot of games where you don't have that choice, and it's basically for narrative reasons, really. I'm thinking of like Resident Evil. You don't want to be able to, you don't want to be able to listen to anything you want while you're playing a Resident Evil game, because the music is such a part of the atmosphere of the game. It really helps amp up the tension or relieve the tension in some cases. But like when you're talking about a game where there's, some sort of player agency in terms of changing the music, like I'm thinking of the Grand Theft Auto series, or even like Tony Hawk, or some of the EA Sports games where you can change up the playlist. If I'm going to go out skateboarding and doing tricks, I want to listen to the music I want to listen to. So yeah, I'm going to listen to Motorhead all the time, or I want to listen to one of my favorite in-game radio stations in GTA. Um, that kind of thing is pretty cool. The the implementation that you've got, where you do have songs that relate to certain players, but then also let people choose which ones they don't want to hear, is pretty neat as well. I mean, you're basically giving them what the recipe or what the menu is, and you're saying, well, this is the way we want you to experience the game. But if you're not cool with hearing this song for the next 4 hours, or however long
yeah,
they
because
need
it
to
can
hear
go
it.
on for a long time. That is another thing.
Yeah, so giving them a choice to put that off is nice. A game with a terrible soundtrack is Ghostbusters for the Sega Master System. I love the Ghostbusters song, but in that game, it's the only thing that you hear for a long time.
Right.
And the game takes a long time to play, and it's very repetitive. They don't even put the full song in the game, and it's just like this lo-fi chiptunes version of it. And it's creepy after a while.
Judging from the chat reactions, I think there have been you just triggered some bad memories. uh,
I love the Ghostbusters song. I like genuinely love it, but I don't want it that much.
On loop.
For
Yeah. Hours. Yimboy in the chat says it felt weird when I was able to pick the song in Sometimes Always Monsters, because I wondered to myself if this is the track that the game creators wanted me to listen to for this part of the game. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. Like, because I guess a lot of people go into games, wanting a directed experience. But like, it was always sort of directed by the like curation of what songs you have available, and there are definitely scenes where specific songs play. Like, there's some pivotal narrative scenes that like I'm not taking the risk on like you playing the party track in the middle of like the finale or something like that. That's just not how we go. But how do you? I mean, I never thought about like a player feeling. I don't know. I don't know what that feeling is. Even if you can expand on that a little bit, but like that weird feeling of wanting the track decided for you. I mean, I guess when you put on an album, you want to you're there to hear what the artist has like put on display in that order. Um, but like we also live in like iTunes era, singles and curated playlists are like the common thing. So I'm curious to hear. Uh, For my first
See,
playthrough,
I,
I didn't change the song because I wanted to go through the game however you guys had made it for me. Oh, that's very sweet. But I wanted you to have the freedom. But after that, you did change it. Okay, cool. Um, sorry, I cut you off, Hatton. But
yeah, we definitely live in like a remix world now, right? Like we've been leading up to this, and now you've got like this ultimate level of remix culture where like someone could put a video up of their daughter singing "I Wonder What's Inside Your Butthole," and then within hours, people have tons of remixes of this thing. You know, outside of us all being at home with like, you know, we want to be doing creative things. We want to be out exploring our worlds, but we're at home, so we're doing our best with what we have. So that, of course, I'm sure has amplified it and expedited that kind of thing. But you know, when you give people, I think if you didn't give people the option of playing whatever in-game song they wanted at whatever time, outside of what was curated, they would, you know, maybe put their stereo on and listen to something else. It's been happening for years. Like I would play Super Nintendo and listen to my Snoop Dogg CD back in the day. So you know, people want to experience things the way they want, um, outside of, you know, also wanting to see what creators had intended. Because you know, you go to a movie and you're basically getting the same thing as everyone else who sees the movie.
yeah,
Um,
the Deer Hunter in the chat points out that the PS4 has the option to just put on Spotify, but I guess games can block that functionality as well. Is that what you mean in the chat? I'm not sure. I don't play my PS4 ever actually. Um, but I mean, I think at the end of the day, we just want the player, audience, whatever, to have a good time. And like for me, I think that comes with the freedom of choice. Um, I think some people have a really hard time um, giving themselves a good experience. Like when you say like, here are the tools to have fun, and then some people just look at them and they go like, I don't know what to do. But I really do feel that like more often than not, um, people will guide themselves to what they want to do. Um, I don't know if that's true or not though. That's just how I feel. Um,
well, hopefully, people want to play the game in the first place, and
yeah,
then
I mean they do. I mean everybody. I'm pretty sure almost everybody here has played or is playing the game or nearly intends to play the game. I see.
or or has heard about it, or has heard about video games.
Yeah, they must like games in some capacity. Um, yeah. Oh, and speaking of games, like Keith, I know you said you don't play too much these days, but do you catch much game news? Do you see like what's happening in the industry? Has anything caught your eye in the last, I don't know, year, 2 years, 3 years? Anything impress you?
I unfortunately I'm just really disconnected from it, and I wish I wasn't, uh, but that's what I've had to do to survive the last several years. It's not that I don't enjoy it, and it's not that it's not interesting. It's more like a protection measure so that if I have something I've got to make, I'm personally more inclined to produce more material if I stay away from it. That's really as
Ooh.
simple as it is.
I can relate to that a lot actually. I spent the greater part of our development cycle avoiding games, specifically indie games, which I've carried a bit of a guilt over, because it's like imagine not listening to other people's music, right? Um, and it's one of those things that like I was always worried about like getting over influenced by stuff. And so I guess my question to you is like, do you have a longing in the midst of that abstinence, or is it something that you've grown comfortable with?
Yeah, I I'm comfortable with it. It's just it I'm open to returning to it at some point. Probably now isn't the best time for me to do that. I should probably be making songs, you know. It's super interesting to me. I've definitely went down some rabbit holes recently as to getting more involved in the sound design of gaming and how thorough and complicated that can get. So I do have an interest in all of that. But as far as being sort of a gamer myself, I'm not that. Um, but I won't rule it out. You know, if I know I need to write music, though, I pretty much have to leave it out. That's where what I found about myself.
I kind of like the idea that you have zero information about games, and so when I tell you that Sometimes Always Monsters is the most popular game in the world right now, you
Well,
you might have to believe me.
I get some news from Shaun. That's the thing.
Right.
I have a little bit of a reference point.
Okay. All right. So I can't pull that one up. Chat Chat asks, do either of you have a favorite track from ASMR Sam?
I need to look at what they're called.
Jesus, yeah, I did. I just did a metadata update, and there's literally like I think across the two soundtracks over 50 tracks. Like, good luck picking, but
Yeah,
I need to actually. I'm calling up laserdestroyerteam.com right now, which does lead to
I'll
the
tell you.
Bandcamp.
I'll tell you my favorite song that I made and
Yeah,
why.
do it.
All right, my favorite song that was pressure cooking, and
that's a
that
people are saying that in the chat.
and the reason I feel that way is, um, it is if I listen to it, I know where I was when I made it initially before it went to Shaun or anyone else to add more stuff to, and I just have such fond memories of that moment, and I think that I make a lot of music I don't feel that way about, and so that particular one just was able to capture a nostalgic moment better maybe than other times in my life.
Yeah, this is a good track. There's a reason it's the title. Man, yeah, because you can just sit on that title screen for a while and let this jam play.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is that?
Pressure Cooking.
Pressure Cooking.
It's
yeah.
on it'd be the opener on the EP.
Yeah, that is a great one. I also like Arped Up in the Hague.
I'll put that one on.
Yeah, it's another old one.
But that's on the previous game's soundtrack. On this one, I know that Star Jewel Supplier came in late in the creative cycle, but it is. I don't know if it's just because it's newer to me, but that's a great one. And I also like another one, Bites in Lust. That was a fun one to work on.
Mine has been, and I think may always be, Pet Rock Meets the Moon. I don't think we were like kind of iffy on if we wanted to make another trailer, and I just like loved that song so much that it was like, I think the thing that pushed me over the edge into making a third trailer for ASM. And it like plays really well. Like it gets so much right about about the whole game. Like, yeah. and especially the themes of like that like big love that like and that um got overwhelming adoration and that sense of smallness that one might feel at the same time. I mean, and it's crazy how much of a song's mood can be conveyed through the title. Like the title of a song adds so much to it, but like it just goes into this like ramp up in affection and then just goes crazy right in the middle and then it calms back down again, and that's kind of like how I feel the arc of the whole game went.
Hmm.
But I mean, actually, I'm curious to think about like what. How did you guys come up with half of these titles or all of these titles? Like what, what the hell? Where did the titles come from?
You just, I know what my process is, and I have an idea what my brother's was for some of them, and it's, in some cases it's a play on words of all the music or songs that I think it sounds like, and then in some cases it's just words that pop in our heads, and then we just plop them on the. Sometimes it makes sense, and other times it's totally random.
Yeah, I've never had a conversation really with Keith about how to come up with song titles, but we're always like, do you think this is more of a blah or is it more of a blah? And we're like, yeah, it's more of a blah. So like, for the last one, Star Jewel Supplier, I think there was another name in the running that Keith was like, I'm thinking this or this. I'm like, it's definitely Star Jewel Supplier.
So and then sometimes we have to Google it to make sure that it doesn't have some other meaning, or
yeah,
if nothing terribly offensive comes up, it's like, well, let's see if this makes it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally not a fan of hurting people's feelings, but if I was
Right.
going to, I wouldn't want it to be accidental. So
Right, exactly. We usually check out the internet to see if it exists in any capacity.
yeah, it's funny that you say that because I basically do the same thing. I go from like, oh, this is a silly title to this is what I think it sounds like, or these are the words that this song evokes in my head when I hear it, or this sounds like a thing that this band would do, and this title kind of relates to this band, and so it's just they seemingly don't really have meaning, but I guess they do. They all come back to some part of the weird creative process we have.
Well, there's no lyrics either, so we're naming them for instrumentals, and I think it's its own unique approach as opposed to, if you got lyrics, it's kind of obvious where you're probably going to name the songs either from the lyrics or you're going to be
Right.
fancy and something that it means but isn't in the lyrics, but it's still about its meaning. And when we're doing instrumentals, we're just forcing ourselves to name them, essentially.
Yeah, like Baba O'Reilly.
Right.
Weird, but also all of my song titles, they are lyrics. I know the words to the songs. I just didn't record them.
Yeah, I've done that too. Like I know what the vocal melody would be if we were writing lyrical music, and then I'm like, well, let's see if I name it that, if anyone else comes to that same conclusion, or maybe, I don't know. I've done that too.
You gotta keep.
I've never thought of lyrics to this soundtrack in all this time. Like, but you really let that it runs through your mind as you're going. I guess if you're creating a whole track, right? Like,
Sometimes it's not really. It's not like lyrics that have a lot of substance for me. Sometimes it might just be a phrase over and over again. Or it might just, I make up songs about my dog. They don't really mean anything. It's like, she's smelly, she stinks. I like her. She's gonna come over here and fart and leave. Just weird stuff like that.
that could apply
See,
to.
I think we could do something with that.
It's the next album.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, on top of the concept of next album, you guys have done some work together that has not been um, for ASM and Sam. Uh, uh, there was Autodestron. Um,
Yeah.
tell
Yeah,
the
and
people.
thanks for reminding us that we intended to do another one of those.
Tell,
Yeah, we just wanted to stay in practice, really, and it was a good excuse to do that. Like it wasn't a project where there was a lot of pressure
cooking.
to make anything. Yeah, no pressure
It was
cooking
fun.
at all. Not that there's a lot of. I mean, you're pretty easy to work with overall, I would say. There's not a lot of pressure. Like I've never felt like, oh shit, I got to get this song done.
Right.
Yeah, Justin's gonna be breathing down our virtual necks.
I mean, most of the soundtrack was done before the game was done, which hopefully, you don't want the soundtrack to be done after the fact, so that makes
No,
sense.
yeah, I think that
Um,
makes a big difference. Like when you've got the ability to listen to the music, um, while you're writing and making stuff, like man, it influences things heavily. I think
awesome.
it's important.
It's funny because there's speaking of my stinky dog, she's come through over here.
Um, no, it definitely plays a huge part, and um, we had a bit of a like getting the finale song right was a little tricky because I'd used a temp song um, that for so long that like it was very heavy in my mind. I think that's probably the one track I probably put up the most fight about. Um, sorry, but it it when you hear the music so often while you're creating, you just feel like it's got to pull the scene together in this specific way, and replacing it was not an easy task. But I'm very very glad with what came out of it. So kudos. Um, but I feel like we lost track of the conversation about Autodestron and the Phantasy Star LP. Um, what what was that process like? You guys just wanted to do more stuff?
Um, yeah, for Autodestron, for me, it was an excuse to learn this iPad app called Korg Gadget, where I was flying to Switzerland for work at the time, and it's a long flight, and I can't really sleep too well on planes. So I had my iPad with me and a little MIDI controller, and I kind of came up with the melodies of two of the songs on there. I think they ended up being called like Grandpa Geneva, Geneva obviously being where I was landing, and then I'm not sure what the other one was called now. But the um, the bulk of those I wrote in the air over the ocean, um, either on the way there, and then the other one was on the way back, and then I asked Keith if he wanted to um, add some stuff, and then we ended up adding a few more tracks and then instrumentation to one another's stuff, and then we felt like, okay, this is at a good spot. We can do a little EP. I feel that it's quick, it's moody, it's powerful, and I haven't listened to it in a long time, but every now and then in the past I would go back and listen to either that or one of the other things that we've done, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe we did this. It like sounds really cool. Like it's moody, it's got a definite vibe to it that I dig and I still like. And I can't say that for a lot of other musical things that I've done where I'll like listen to it a bit later and I'm like, oh, it's not really what I would like to put out now, but like that stuff I feel holds up.
I feel that about almost all my old work. Like
Yeah,
it's really hard to love your old stuff, because you grow. Like you grow in skill and taste, and it's really hard to like appreciate what I think other people enjoy about your old work. Um, yeah, it's just one of those things, though. I mean, do you do you, do is there anything about like any of your old work that you like? It's like ear splinters to hear.
I think
Oh
some
yeah.
of yeah, some of the stuff on the They Bleed Pixel soundtrack, I would not leave on the soundtrack. That was the first game I composed music for, and for the soundtrack, I just decided I'm going to put most of the stuff that I composed on here. I wanted to give people value for the money, even though most of the music didn't make it into the game, as is the creative process. Most of the music should not make it into the game. You should have a choice
That's
as
not
a creator.
that's not how we work.
It's not well.
That's not the vagabond
Well,
way.
the Laser Destroyer team way is to be so damn good that nothing is throwaway. Whereas me solo, there was just a lot of throwaway stuff. I was still figuring out my creative process back then as well. And so some of those tracks that are just really uncomfortable, I think part of it was that it was supposed to be uncomfortable because the game is kind of spooky and scary and difficult. But then some of them I feel just don't work as they are. And so when I listen to it, I'm like, hey, I did this thing. And I'll listen to it. I'm like, okay, some of it's all right. Then some of it's good. And then some of it's like, I'd rather not listen to it.
And Keith,
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky business listening to stuff you've made or whatever it is. If you make videos and whatever your output is, I think it's a dangerous business to get too caught up in the past. I do love living in the past if I channel it to make things that are new, but to kind of go back to old recordings, I think you have to be in a safe mental place to do that, or you'll just tear it apart. And then if you do love it, you're that much more inclined to keep repeating the things that worked for you, and that's cool. But after a while, that stops working too. So I just think it's best to be careful about listening to old material.
have you found any good like personal tricks to getting into that healthy mental space to review your old stuff? Because it's something I definitely struggle with.
I would, if I were going to do it now, the first thing I'd try and do is hypnotize myself or meditate for a while and feel that I'm away from where I've been emotionally, and then kind of go back and revisit it. I think if you're going at things you've made that you might judge too harshly and you're all ramped up because of the news of the world or people that you clients or whatever is the thing that's driving your emotional state, you're going to maybe bring that with you. So if there's some kind of way to, new age physical or new age mental approach, self-help that you might try before approaching it, maybe that's that's what I would try and do if I want to go down a rabbit hole of re-listening to stuff I've made and not being judgmental of it.
There's two ways to look at it, really. As a creative person, you hope to continue growing and you hope to continue getting better. And so, with that mindset, you can look at things that you've done in the past with the understanding that you've come a long way and that you were just learning things, or you might listen to something and remember, okay, this is when I had this particular instrument and I was trying this new thing. And then you can kind of have that personal memory associated with it. Coming from the video game journalism side of things, I can look or read an old article and I can remember how the game made me feel, or I can remember how I felt writing the review, or how I felt about the review once it was done. Um, but then the flip side is sometimes I might listen to something and I have a better appreciation for it now than when I made it. And this doesn't just go for things that I've made, but like for albums that I used to listen to. and that I then was embarrassed that I liked, then I could come back to and be like, oh, actually, there are some really cool things here that are interesting sonically. You know, I don't really listen. The only times I listen to my music is when I'm making it, and then afterward here and there. But like, even just listening to something from 10 years ago, it's like, why would I think of doing that? It's like really weird. Like,
Mhm.
and sometimes the answer is because I didn't know any better, and sometimes it's, I don't know, I just wanted to do something weird. And so I don't know if I enjoy listening to my own music. It's weird. It's a weird thing to think about. But hopefully when you listen to old stuff, you mostly don't hate it.
Mhm.
So
Well, I mean, I definitely hope that, I mean, we all keep continuing to make great new things, but I also hope that all three of us find the peace of mind to appreciate the great things that we have done in the past.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to do sometimes when you're creative, but I think you guys should definitely be proud of the work you did for Sometimes Always Monsters, and just as proud of the work we did for Always Sometimes Monsters. I've been really grateful to have you guys as part of the Vagabond Dog team, and help make these great games. And I think all the fans equal that sentiment. So yeah, I guess thanks, guys.
oh yeah,
Thank you.
well, it's been fun to work on these games, and the interesting thing here is this is the first series of games that we've worked collaboratively on with Laser Destroyer team. You know, there's Keith, there's Chad Thompson as well, and Chris Tate, and we all bring certain things to the table. And I think having that group dynamic, even though we are spread across from one another geographically, it still gives us like a almost band like inspiration between the different members. So it's much more fun to compose with them than it is to just do something on my own, um, because eventually when I do something on my own, I come to a point where I can't listen to it anymore. It's not interesting to me, and I don't want to do it. So um, being able to take a piece of music and then send it to someone else and then get it back as something new is a real thrill, and it's very cool because sometimes you might not think a lot about a little bit of tune that you've made, and then it comes back and it's something very different and more special than it was before.
Cool. Well, I guess let the people know where they can find more of you guys and other projects. Well, if you guys want to give any shout outs, I guess now's the best time for that.
Go ahead. I'll let Keith do
All
the
right, I'm
shout
gonna
outs.
state these for the record. It's gonna take a second. Let's see. Um, I'm in the midst of an ongoing project called Palace Pier, and it is on Bandcamp. And my brother and I, who's involved in this project, Chad Thompson, we continue to put music out under the name Johnny Headband, and we always will. We used to perform a lot, and we don't perform as much anymore, but we still do release music. And those are the two main projects that are active right now. There's lots of other ones, but I'll just stick with those two that are active.
I'll tell people to jump into our Discord, and I'll send them links to everything in the announcements channel. So if you guys are not part of our Discord, join our Discord, and I'll share the links to all the great music so you can check it out after this is done. Jake says, no mention of the Doggone Golfing soundtrack. Buy that too. It's amazing work.
Doggone golfing, yeah, that's right. That was just I worked on that outside of the team, um, because Jake was like, I'm making this small game. I don't have a big budget, but do you want to do some music? And I was like, yeah, sure. So it was nice. It's basically like one song, but there's different parts of it. I don't know. It's weird. It's pretty fun though. It's a fun game too.
He says you're the best.
Thank you, Jake.
But in addition to Doggone Golfing, what else is there in the Hattonverse?
The DJ Finish Him stuff. I did some stuff on my personal SoundCloud a while ago. I usually just, I don't know, I like making music, but mostly I like making silly music for my own amusement that I don't end up recording. I'll just like jam on my keyboards and just, you know, sing weird stuff. Actually, I want to give a shout out to Mark Ribbolett, who is this amazing electronic music maker who does live shows where he'll like ask people, give me a topic, and then he'll start singing and like just jamming these cool 90s dance beats, and he screams and he's shirtless and he's wild. He looks like a nerd, but he throws down. Like he's hilarious. Basically I try to do stuff like that at home to keep myself amused. I don't know if I'll ever release any of that, but I'll let you know if I do.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you guys both for jumping in this chat. It's our first industry chat on the Twitch channel. I think it went pretty well. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'll drop the links to all the new music in the Discord, and hopefully people can continue to enjoy the ASM Sam soundtracks and enjoy the game. And yeah, thanks everybody in the chat, and I guess we'll catch you guys some other time. Bye for now.
Bye.